Hello there, and welcome to Andre's YouTube vlog for January 6th, 2012. Actually, this is going to amount up to my second YouTube vlog of the year officially, and I apologize for my, whitewashed-looking face, but it's kind of snowing outside my window right now, just spitting a little bit. Hasn't been that snowy a winter. For some reason, I just haven't been able to come up with any real lasting ideas for YouTube vlogs so far. I have them, spur of the moment, they come and they go, and I forget them, and I'll probably come back to them later on another time. But today's subject is something that's kind of musical. I just wanted to kind of muse a little bit about today. When I was growing up, I was, I'm not going to go too deep into it. I don't like getting personal in my videos too much, believe it or not. I love listening to, well, I guess you would call it, rap, hip-hop now, but rap, Run DMC, Sugar Hill Gang, or whoever it was at that time. I found out about people like Public Enemy later. But there was a lot of people I didn't know anything about. There was a lot about rap and hip-hop I didn't know anything about. I wasn't from New York. That was where hip-hop was happening at that time. And I watched this show called Independent Lens many years ago with Terrence Howard, who was talking about having more knowledge of hip-hop even than I did growing up, and how, as time went on, he started to be interested in analyzing some of the genre's more negative qualities. And that's kind of what I'm talking about today. I noticed, as with everybody, that as the 80s and the 90s progressed, hip-hop became very much more aggressive. Initially, it was just banter, maybe a little bit arrogant at times, but harmless. And then all of a sudden, they started getting these tipper stickers onto them. And, if I go into a record store today, even in rock and roll or heavy metal, almost 90% of the records and CDs or whatever in the store that have the parental advisory tipper stickers on them are hip-hop. Sometimes I wonder if it's just, if they're just going after it, if it's just a way of dealing with hip-hop exclusively. I don't know. I'm not involved in the politics of it. What I do know is this. I watched another show a few years ago called Dave Chappelle's Block Party. Remember that? He had Erykah Badu and I believe Common on. And he was talking to this artist. Dave Chappelle was talking to this artist. She was in her 60s or 70s, and she was a white lady. And he asked her what she thought of hip-hop, and she said she did not like hip-hop because of its violence and its sexism. Heard it over and over again. Now, everywhere I go on the internet, and I've been online for quite some time, Facebook or MySpace or YouTube, and I look under people's profiles and their personal interests, I hear so many people say, I like a huge variety of music, except, and these are the three biggies, opera, country, and hip-hop. Almost everyone doesn't care for hip-hop. It's still almost a fringe thing. And, several years ago I was watching cable television, and I noticed that so many of the hip-hoppers out there were extremely foul-mouthed. Not so much sexist all the time, but also quite homophobic, which I didn't understand. I didn't even see any homosexual rappers out there. And, recently I got an album by a guy called Drake, a new album, and I was listening to it, and I was actually very surprised at, even though he had a foul mouth sometimes, and some of his lyrics were sexist, and maybe even, had racial epithets to them, I noticed that he was tending to analyze and investigate the possibilities of why, he felt that way. And actually thinking about some of the things that he appreciated about women or his friends or his racial identity. And, I'm not one of these people. I remember watching the Huxtables, Cosby Show, too, and hearing them talk about when their son Theo is doing a rap for a college report, and they're saying, oh, well, couldn't you sing about something or talk about something, relevant or whatever? And in his case, he talked about education and all that. You remember how they were. But anyway, I think there's always this thing with me. What do you have to say? What are you conscientious about? And, you know, I'm the type of person who listens to, you know, James Brown or old Kool and the Gang from the early 70s. People like Earth, Wind and Fire, you know, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, you know, all these people who, you know, bring out a very intense social consciousness in their music and allow people to interrelate to it. And my opinion, just my opinion on how hip-hop relates with this audience, is that it always seemed to relate very strongly to people who are a lot like the rappers, people who lived in that way and who lived that life and who were part of the hip-hop scene. And there was like a secret language going on between them. They may have been trying to reach the people, but inevitably they were speaking only the language internally, which there was a lot of vulgarity. There was a lot of arrogance and a lot of posturing, and it just seemed to be part of the genre. And I think hip-hop, of all musics, you know, certain types of really twangy country music, certain opera, is probably one of the all-time most hated-on musical genre. I would say equal or more so than it's actually loved. In my opinion on hip-hop as a whole, as a genre, is basically this. It's a wonderful art form out of the oral and narrative tradition. And it's like the blues. You can do so much with it. And I'm wondering why. I don't know if it's just, you know, the music industry or what. Why hip-hop doesn't seem to always be able to broaden outward into different subject matters. They seem to be able to not talk about they don't seem to be able to talk about, I'm sorry for that, they don't seem to be able to talk about subjects that are genuinely uncomfortable and that need to be dealt with in our society. They cannot talk about homosexuality unless it's just, you know, locker room style homophobia among heterosexual men, or they can't seem to really, with the exception of maybe Drake and a few people like that, really analyze their own sexist thoughts. And their social views all come from a point of view of aggression. Once in a while, though, there are some excellent people, and I'll tell you, The Roots, Common, and you know, Tribe Called Quest in their day, and another very independent group called the Sand People, who hip-hop fans should really investigate out there, are all doing wonderful things, like Arrested Development did. They're all making very conscious music that's very analytical and going in a very good direction for hip-hop. Outkast, I felt they were doing the same thing too, although there's some tendency to, you know, go into the language, and sometimes I feel it's commercial. You know, I feel that they do it because they want to be heard and they want their voice to echo strongly and to get people's attention, and they want to sell records. I mean, a lot of hip-hoppers do want to sell records. They want to make money this way. And if they find that, you know, foul language or things that will upset, you know, certain people will gain record sales out of just social rebellion or whatever, they will do it. And that's fine as long as you have a lot of good counterpoints. And I think there's a whole lot of broad subject matters that hip-hop could deal with. And I think it should deal more with a more diverse range of sexuality and not confine itself so much to anger and sexism, and that it should become broader and it should become bigger. Now that it is the mainstream of music, as Smokey Robinson said in the Wax Poetic magazine, it should embrace that. I mean, I've even thought about making my own hip-hop album, but it wouldn't be anything like what's going on out there. I would talk about things like homosexuality. I would talk about things that, you know, hip-hoppers even might find uncomfortable. I think more people should do that. You know, it's a great medium. It's like musical poetry. You know, you can do almost anything with it. It's open. So it should be kept open. And those are just my thoughts on hip-hop, and that's my subject for today. See you next time.